Yeah.
But there must have been somebody else who's been doing it too. I can't be bothered going.
But the whole thing with this meeting is supposed to have started at 2.
I quite enjoy it though. I like it. It's interesting. Well, you pick up all sorts of things, don't you?
Right, it's just gone 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. So welcome to the second meeting of the Economy and Sustainability Scrutiny panel, with today's focus being on housing delivery. So just initially, we'll go through apologies for absence. So we've got Councillor Midder, who's got another council commitment this evening, and Jerry Barwick, who's one of our co-optees from Make It Ealing, who unfortunately has got another commitment this evening as well. I think they're the only 2 apologies that we know of. So we'll next go on to, so in terms of, we've got a number of officers joining us online this evening. So no, Peter George, the Strategic Director, is with us, but online we've got a number of officers. So we've got Adam Towley, who's the Head of New Business. We've got Jamie Burns, Assistant Director of Housing, Philip Brown, the Director of Housing Delivery. We've got our other co-op team member, Stephanie Ajay, who's a member of the Citizens Tribunal, Enos's Tribunal, because I know one of the focuses we want to make sure that equality was a part of this panel. And we have also Dan Keogh, who's going to be one of our speakers this evening from Savills. So they're all joining us online this evening. There's no urgent matters to be heard, and there's no matters to be considered in private. Are there any declarations of interest above what anyone's already declared?
No.
No. Great. So that takes us neatly onto the minutes from the last meeting, which was on Tuesday, the 4th of July. Are there any comments or corrections that anyone has noticed on the minutes at all? No. So can we take those as an approved set of minutes? Excellent. Sign those. Right, so the next item is the panel of sort of panel operations. So the first part of that is co-opting the 2 co-optees. So if you remember back to the last meeting, we hadn't actually had people in place to co-opt onto the panel. So we went away and We're pleased to say that Jerry Barwick, the Chief Executive Maker Ealing, has had accepted the offer to come on as a co-op team member, but unfortunately, like I said, is not able to make it this evening. I'm really glad that Stephanie Ajay can join us, and she also came on the site visit we went to a few weeks ago. So are members happy to approve those two co-optees to the panel? Great, thank you. In terms of the work programme, we'll take that at the end of the meeting, just that we can sort of maybe reflect on what we've discussed. So then that takes us through to item 7, which is the main item for this evening, which is the housing delivery programme.
Just if I may, Chair, I've already mentioned this to the officer, but just a point of order. We did receive the documents only yesterday, and I think, in order to do justice to this, and in fairness to the officers, we do need more time to be able to scrutinise. So for future meetings, I think, it is a standard procedure to send that in advance so we can go through. It is an important duty that we have here. So just to put it on the record, please, for future meetings, if those can be sent before, the day before, would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not overly sure what the delay was in terms of getting the presentations to us, but you make a valid point. It's very hard to go to sort of scrutinise properly without having had ample time to go through them. So we'll definitely make a point of that for the future meetings. Thank you. But back to item 7, there's a number of presentations that we'll be having this evening. What we'll do is we will go through all of the presentation and take questions at the end, because I think sometimes otherwise, one presentation may provoke a question that maybe the next presentation will cover. So I think we'll take all of those presentations and then have a set of sort of Q&A after that. So to kick off, we've got Peter George. I think you'd like to speak first on housing delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to introduce myself to those of you I've not met, I'm Peter George, the Council Strategic Director for Economy and Sustainability. Is there an echo? Is that better? Is that, yeah. I've tried. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, we might have to just make do a bit. I don't know why there's an echo. Is this needed for people in the room or people at home?
People online.
Yeah, okay. So I've been here about six months now as the Strategic Director for Economy and Sustainability. So that's responsible for housing delivery, but also housing strategy, climate change, town planning, culture, parks, and other facilities. I'm also, maybe it's better if I lean back.
Yeah.
Also responsible for regeneration and economic development, so quite a wide portfolio. And this is the second of 4 sessions that we're going to be doing. So in terms of the kind of the running order, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview now. Then we've got 4 separate presentation that colleagues that have dialed in are going to take you through. And we've structured this deliberately so that we start at quite a macro scale. So you've got an overall kind of macro housing context. Then we step in to stepping into the borough-wide picture in terms of talking to you about the what a housing strategy is and how we're approaching it. I will then provide some kind of Ealing context for housing and housing delivery and relevant planning policy. Then Philip will conclude by taking you through where we are with actually getting homes delivered across our various sites. So that's the running order. And as you said, Chair, happy to take questions at the end or after each presentation, however you choose. So I think unless there's any questions with that kind of running order, I will ask Dan, who's dialed in and from Savills, to begin by giving you the residential development overview. So I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, everybody. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. I'm happy to share my screen if that's the intention. So if you just bear with me, I'll do that. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that up on the screen. Yes, good evening. So by way of introduction, I'm Dan Keogh, Director in the Affordable Housing Development and Regeneration team at Savills. And I've been asked this evening by the officer team to provide the group with an overview in terms of state of the market, really, in terms of where we have seen residential development in the London market in particular, moving in the last sort of 12 months or so, and where indeed we see it going in the short to medium term also. There's three sort of key elements that I would like to cover off through this presentation. The first is a bit of an economic backdrop, an overview of the economic backdrop for house building, with a particular focus on the impact of inflation and interest rates and borrowing rates. Moving on then to a bit of a summary of recent trends that we've seen in the London development market, in the sort of the house building market generally, and then thirdly looking in a little bit more focus at the London market and some key themes which are particularly relevant for the council. So first of all, if we start with the economic backdrop, I mean, everyone's going to be very aware of the impact that inflation has had on the general public over the last 12 to 15 months or so. Cost of living has been a term used widely amongst political and news broadcasters. Where we are seeing inflation at the current moment is a gradual easing, which we anticipate moving forward to continue as we move forward into the new year. The graph on the left here summarizes the significant hike in CPI that we saw peak in Q1 of this year at over 10% annual growth. The announcement today, I believe it was, at CPI maintaining at 6.7% is a further step in the right direction, and we are anticipating further reductions in inflation as we go through the end of this year and most importantly into the new year as well, as we look to return back towards the Bank of England's long-term target of 2%. That's coupled with an increasingly stabilized, we would say, position in terms of where interest rates are anticipated to move also. Again, in response to persistently high inflation, a series of rate rises have been approved by the Bank of England's MPC. We are anticipating a stabilisation at around 5.25%, where we currently are. Potentially a further 25 bips rise may be on the cards, but certainly we feel like we're at the peak of the market now. And together with an anticipated reduction in inflation, a reduction in interest rates as we move towards the back end of next year and then into 2025 in particular, is really, really important in terms of setting the scene of a more stable and more positive economic backdrop for the housing market. We've obviously been through a period of significant turbulence over the last 18 months or so, and the market is really looking for some more confidence to come through consumers and ultimately purchasers of new homes. And so whilst much of what I'll talk about this evening is slightly pessimistic, I do want to highlight some of the muted optimism that we are seeing coming out of economic forecasters. So we are anticipating inflation to fall further through the course of this year and into the new year. We're also expecting the base rate to have effectively peaked at or around the current position, with some rate reductions anticipated in the new year. And what this is anticipated to lead to is weak economic growth, but importantly, not the economy not entering into recession in the new year. So again, muted optimism, I think, is the line that I would probably use in terms of looking forward after a period of significant turbulence. So then if we turn to the residential market and what's been happening in that over the last 12 months or so, it's been widely reported in the national press, house prices have fallen and are continuing to fall. Commentators such as Nationwide have reported significant material reduction in prices, house prices, certainly over the course of this year. But looking back, probably since Q3 2022 and the mini budget, which really did trigger quite a significant hike in policy rates and had a significant impact in terms of house buying demand also. But that was off the back of a period of, you might say, relative softening through the summer of last year, which followed quite a significant period of house price growth as well. And that's important to say in terms of setting the scene for the falls that we have seen through the course of 2023. So whilst in nominal terms, there has been a reduction of, let's say, 3% generally across the UK market, actually, when you bake in the impact of inflation, in real terms, the actual house price fall has probably been double digits, actually. And that's quite important, again, in terms of the confidence that consumers, that the public have in terms of the economic situation currently. This graph, this chart looks at the relative performance of the London market now in relation to the national picture. And really, it's a tale of two halves. If we go back to sort of, you might say, the 2020 outlook, the London market had actually been outperforming the UK picture for the preceding 5 years in terms of the rate of house price growth. But that kick in of lockdown, the first COVID lockdown, began to change priorities amongst consumers, amongst purchasers. And really, since that point, we have seen the national market, the UK picture, effectively outperform the London market in terms of the rate of house price growth. Now, actually, how have they performed over the course of the last sort of 12 to 15 months? Well, actually, the picture has been relatively similar in terms of trend in house price reductions, but obviously in pounds and pence terms, the London market has fallen further, purely because values of house prices are that much higher in the market in which we are operating in. Now, that picture remains current, and again nationwide reported 0.5% fall in house prices generally through September, and there is also a softening, a clear softening in terms of sales demand, in terms of new inquiries for the September month compared to the equivalent pre-COVID average through 2017 to 19. There remains a material reduction in terms of demand for new homes, which is a direct result of issues around mortgage affordability and general confidence in the economic situation currently. One of the key drivers for the slowdown, you might say, in sales performance over the course of this year has been the termination of the Help to Buy initiative. What we can see is through, you might say, the last 5 years, Help to Buy made quite a significant contribution to new home sales across the London market. You might say it was covering about 40 to 50% or incentivising 40 to 50% of sales overall over that period. The graph on the right-hand side does really demonstrate that there has been a material fall in sales, reduction in sales since the culmination of the Help to Buy programme late last year. What that meant is developers and house builders are looking at different routes to exit, including a greater focus on overseas sales, but also a greater focus on bulk disposals to third parties, including affordable housing providers as well. So if we look a little bit more in terms of the London market and some of the trends and challenges that are currently facing house builders, from a developer perspective, we can really point to a number of supply side and also demand side issues, which will affect all deliverers of new housing, public and private. From a supply side perspective, again, alongside higher costs of capital, we are coming out, you might say, of a period of significant build cost inflation as well, which has put real pressure on the viability of new house building. Alongside that, a number of our clients are very, very attuned to the to responding to emerging legislation around building safety and fire safety as well, particularly the introduction of second stairwells for taller, higher density schemes, of which there are a number coming forward in Ealing. That has a material impact also on cost, on realisable value, and ultimately on viability. So there's pressures from a supply side there. We've talked about some of the demand side issues as well in terms of interest rates and the impact that that's had on mortgage affordability, and also the termination of the Help to Buy initiative, which otherwise sort of alleviates some of those challenges. And what are developers, what are house builders doing? Well, they are offering a greater range and a greater extent of discounts and incentives to encourage sales through the door. And as I mentioned, they're looking at the overseas market. They're continuing to look at that in some focus, and exploring alternative exit routes, including bulk sales to third parties, including affordable housing providers, and in some instances, build-to-rent operators as well. But all of this is contributing really to a general falling in the level of activity in the house building market over the last 12 months or so. And of course, you'll be very familiar with the theme that there's a persistent demand and supply imbalance in the London market. Don't necessarily need to dwell on this too much because it's been widely reported, but as a region, we're still not delivering the number of homes that are needed and the type of homes that are needed also. And that's been a persistent picture from far longer than the current economic challenges can be blamed for. That's more of a structural issue, which various stakeholders, the GLA, authorities such as yourself and the private sector are looking to address. And this is quite an interesting slide in terms of the distribution of housing delivery. We identified that only actually 6 boroughs across London have met or exceeded the local plan, their London plan delivery target. So Ealing are one of a number of boroughs that are below that in terms of house building and deliveries achieved. sitting somewhere in the middle in terms of the overall trend for boroughs. So there is a clear need for Ealing and its peers to be doing more in terms of encouraging new house building and delivery in the context, notwithstanding of the challenging economic and market circumstances. And as another sort of brief indicator in terms of the direction of travel, it is worth noting the relatively low and falling number of applications coming through the planning system also across London. The chart on the left-hand side refers to incremental permissions in terms of a rolling 12-month total, looking at the inner and outer London boroughs and then London overall. Now, actually, you can see here that outer London boroughs are relatively holding steady in terms of new permissions being granted up until Q2 of this year, but there has been a significant drop off in terms of inner London permissions, where a significant proportion of new housing is coming forward, probably to, well, as the chart suggests, to its lowest level relatively for the last 15 years or so. But almost the biggest concern is the number of new applications coming through the planning system also. Now, there's a variety of reasons, many of which I've already discussed, as to what would disincentivize developers, house builders, landowners from bringing forward new applications. But the result of that, the net result of that general trend is in the short to medium term, it's likely that's going to drive again a further shortage in terms of new housing supply. So I am conscious that I've spoken with a fair degree of pessimism on this presentation this evening, but I did want to end on a bit of a positive note, albeit again a muted positive note, in terms of the strength of the affordable housing sector, in terms of maintaining the rate of delivery, the rate of house building as a proportion of the overall sector, of the overall market. And indeed, 2021-22 was a particularly strong year in terms of affordable starts on site. And actually we're anticipating, although the data hasn't been released as yet, it's due next month, that 2022-23 will be an equally, if not better, a stronger year in terms of housing delivery, linked very much to the culmination of the previous affordable housing programme, which Ealing, amongst many other housing providers, were very cognizant of. The slight concern, though, moving forward, taking into account what a number of the themes that I've already picked up on, is the slightly longer term outlook for affordable housing delivery within the sector. Alongside all of the market and economic challenges that I've articulated, clearly housing providers have a significant responsibility in terms of responding to the building safety agenda, the fire safety agenda, in terms of investment in existing stock, and the capital expenditure tie-up that brings with it. So we are anticipating a lot of the feedback that we've received from our clients, the regular discussions that we've had, is that new development programs, house building programs, are being affected by the necessary need to invest in existing housing stock, coupled with the other issues that we talked about in terms of rising cost of capital, subdued sort of outlook in terms of sales, and certainly in the short term as well. So there may be some pressures coming forward within the local affordable housing providers and registered provider world as well. And really, as a summary in terms of what we've touched on this evening, London values are falling. They have been falling, and potentially more to come until there's further clarity, greater clarity in terms of interest rates peaking, and hopefully interest rates becoming beginning to fall, and a knock-on impact in terms of mortgage affordability improving. New home sales are down roughly a third this year, off the back of much of what we've discussed. And private starts are also significantly down compared to their peak in 2015, but also compared to recent years. And the other key thing I've noted this evening is, in terms of looking forward, the number of applications have also halved. So there's a lot to suggest that in the short to medium term, house building numbers and delivery numbers are going to be more muted, and certainly below the level of demand and need that London has. And I'll leave it there. Thank you. Happy to take questions either now or a little bit later on in the evening.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll do questions at the end once we've heard all the presentations. So I think the next one is Maggie's next.
Yeah, we've got Campbell Tickell next, who is the housing consultancy that the council has appointed about 3 months ago to prepare a borough-wide housing strategy. So I think it's Maggie or James are going to take you through their presentation.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I'm joining from Ireland. I'm at a social housing conference in Ireland. I wasn't quite sure that I was going to be here, but and it's great to be here. So in case my Wi-Fi drops, James will actually take over from me, which is possible. Just to introduce myself, I'm Maggie Rafalovich. I'm a director at Campbell Tickell. And we've been commissioned to do the housing strategy for Ealing. Just a bit of background for myself, actually. Ealing is a borough that I actually know particularly well. In a previous life, I worked for what was then called the Housing Corporation, and I covered West London. So Ealing was one of the boroughs that I covered, and actually was funding a lot of schemes there. I then joined Brent Council, and I was the chair of the West London Affordable Housing Strategy. So we did a lot of work on a sub-regional basis as well. So it's a borough that I know particularly well. So what we were asked to do today was actually to just give you an idea about what is a housing strategy and why are we doing it. So James, if you can go to the next slide, please. If James can move forward. James, are you okay there? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start talking and we'll catch up with the slides if that's okay. Is that all right, Peter?
If James stops sharing, I can share it on mine.
Okay, if you can share it on yours then. Okay, thanks. So I wasn't really aware that we were going to be doing this this afternoon. Okay. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Peter. Great. Okay, so just briefly, what is it? What's a housing strategy, and why do we do it? I mean, in essence, it's the idea is it's a high-level strategy. It captures what Ealing's vision is going to be for the area, and it usually covers a time span of between 3 and 5 years. 5 would be the absolute maximum, because lots of things actually will change. So 3 years is very often the case. Now, as I said, it's a high-level document, but it's very important that alongside it, there would be an action plan so that you can actually see specific activities that you can build on it. Otherwise, you're just going to be a document that you put on your electronic shelf. So it's important to have an action plan that comes out of it, how you're going to be implemented, and etc. The other thing that's really important is it has to be based on an in-depth review of data and evidence. And some of the stuff that Savills has done, we're talking about that kind of evidence we're doing, your housing needs assessments, your local plan, etc. So that kind of evidence base is really important. And it has to be based on actually talking to people within the council, whether it's officers, members, residents, and other key stakeholders, because each local authority area will be unique, and that really needs to reflect what's happening in that. The other thing to say about a housing strategy is it's not a statutory requirement. I mean, in the government might want it, but it's not a statutory requirement. When I first started working in housing, it was, but no longer is the case. But it is something that more and more authorities are asking for. In the last few years, we've been working in different places within the country, and we just finished a very housing strategy for a very large local authority in North East London. So more and more authorities are actually looking to do that, and I think this is going to be the first sort of really comprehensive housing strategy that Ealing's had for a while. I just wanted to also point out that Ealing is a stock owning authority. Not all authorities are, but it is. And as such, it's subject to new consumer regulations. So there are consumer standards by the regulator of social housing. And from April, local authorities are going to have to adhere to that. So why produce them? Okay, ultimately, a housing strategy has looking at three main themes. So supply, have we got what we want, for who we want, where we want, all those kind of needs. The quality of the homes, be there across tenure, and the affordability. Now, the affordability has become a much greater issue in the last few years. 20 years ago, the housing strategies focused very much on people in the greatest need, but the gap between people's incomes and the values of homes has increased to such an extent that it covers the affordability issue, covers a much wider range of people within the local authority area. It kind of reaffirms the council's overall strategic priorities and how it's going to be responding to developing trends and issues. So from Dan's previous presentation, the issue around the values and the issue around less supply coming through, that wasn't the case a few years ago. It's going to be a case now, so that will have to be taken into account. The other thing is we need to actually see, okay, this is a vision, this is what we want to do. What is it in a particular local authority? What activities do you need? What resources do you need? How are the wider services and partners going to contribute to the housing priorities? It's important to see how the links between housing, other things that Ealing are doing is also important. And it's a way of actually telling your partners and the people within the council and other people what you're going to be doing. It's a tool for communicating, be it sometimes it's a prospectus, sometimes it's actually in other things, just interacting with other people. And it's also the action plan is something that you can actually monitor and report on progress. So this particular committee in 2 years' time might very well want to see, okay, we've done the strategy, we've got the action plan, how have you been able to deliver it? And it also gives kind of the justification to actually the new policies and schemes, such as, for example, the property licensing scheme. So what do they normally cover? Okay, this housing strategy covers all tenures of housing within the local authority area, includes the council-owned stock. At a time, there used to be, within housing strategies, traditionally, there used to be a section on private rented sector, a section on council-owned, etc. Nowadays, they don't tend to be that way, but they will cover, all the tenures will be covered. And the contents has to reflect what actually is happening in an area. So, again, Dan's presentation about the housing supply, and we'll go into more details in the strategy about specific tenures and the types of housing that will be. We talked about the quality, and we talked about building safety and energy efficiency. That's something that's going to be really important. Homelessness and rough sleeping, the council does have to have a homelessness strategy separate from that, a statutory requirement, and which we're going to be looking at as well. But this overall strategy will look at. It looks at housing options, be it for people with specialist housing needs or for people that the council can signpost to other areas, for example, the private rented sector or low-cost homeownership. So it looks at options that people in Ealing could use. We talked about managing the council housing stock. It's a big issue. Just like housing associations are diverting money to the quality of the stock, that's going to be a massive issue for Ealing, looking at the HRA, your housing revenue account, needing to put money into that. That's a really important bit. And also, we'll be engaging with private landlords, with registered providers, and with developers. So that's the sort of issues that it covers. What's very important, actually, that it isn't a standalone document, the housing strategy. It has to relate to other key strategies and plans. So we've got things like the London Plan and the GLA housing strategy. Most importantly, the council's overall corporate plan. How does that housing feed into that? Looking at local plan and master plans, the homelessness strategy I've also talked about. There are specific housing strategies, for example, the housing revenue account or asset management and resident engagement or licensing. But there are other things that the council does that really is important for housing to link up to, whether it's climate change or health and well-being. So how can housing support those other things that are the objectives that the council wants to do, and vice versa? What are the things that other departments in the council are doing that can actually support the housing strategy? So just to let you know what we've been doing up to now in the last few months. Well, we've reviewed so many council documents, you can't imagine. We've looked at all of those. We've looked at your plans and your policies and surveys and performance reports. We are doing more information on data gathering and analysis of needs assessment. One, because we've updated it to include the 2021 census. We're also doing more information to look at actually the 7 towns, because I know that in area as large as Ealing, what you need in one part of the borough is not going to be necessarily what you need in another. And I know that a lot of the work that the council is doing on other areas is actually focusing on the 7 towns. So we will be looking at that. We've interviewed council officers across housing and related service areas. So we've, public health, for example, we've been talking to in adult social care, we've been talking to children's social care, other than just all the people within the council. We've also been talking to external stakeholders, housing associations, housing developers, and homelessness charities. And we've still got more consultation to do internally in terms of, that I'm going to be speaking to several members in the next few weeks, as well as actually other senior people within the council, etc. So a lot of consultation. We do need to do more consultation with residents and community groups, and we need to develop the action plan and prepare the report for Cabinet and the public consultation. So that's what we've been doing to date, and that's where we are. And I think that was a pretty quick run through of what a housing strategy is and what we've been doing.
Thanks, Maggie. I will now share my screen and do presentation number 3 for you. So just to give you a few numbers, to give you a little bit of a sense of housing in the borough. So just to pick out 2 or 3. So I think firstly, average house price in the borough is generally higher than that in London. I think it's interesting. I think this was a lot London-wide. 60% of residents disagreed with the statement there were a good range of affordable homes to rent or buy. Rents have been capped at 7%, which actually, given where we are and where we've been with inflation, that can actually create capacity issues within RP business plans, as well as the council's kind of business plan, housing revenue account as well. So a bit of context, we've of course got our target of 4,000 generally affordable homes, and I'll come on and talk about what we mean by generally affordable homes. Council colleagues have been very successful at securing £100 million of grant funding from the GLA to deliver affordable homes. That money can only be drawn down if the council achieves starts on sites by spring 2026. So there's a pressure and a challenge for us to deliver that volume of homes amidst a challenging housing climate that you've just heard about from our colleagues at Savills. Colleagues will of course be aware that, like every local authority in London and beyond, our council that has its own financial challenges that we must work within. So it's not the case that we can kind of just throw money at the problem in order to unlock housing. The good news, despite that kind of outlook that Savills gave in terms of planning applications, our head of development management is saying to me that she has seen no slowdown in the number of planning applications coming forward that are promoting housing. So far, our borough is looking more resilient in terms of that housing pipeline than other parts of London, which I think isn't overly surprising, because we've actually got 2 of the biggest growth areas in the whole of London. So Southall and Acting are 2 of the biggest housing growth areas in London, and there's so much activity happening in those areas, and they are still buoyant and resilient. I guess another good reason why our housing market remains strong is Crossrail is still young, it's still new, and that has been a real catalyst for growth and will continue to be so. And obviously most other boroughs haven't had the number of stations and therefore the benefits from Crossrail that we have. Nevertheless, there are viability problems, particularly impacting our own development schemes. Philip's going to talk through all of those projects in a moment. But what is causing particular stress at the moment, and we think this is going to continue to play out over the coming months, is contractor defaults. So that's to make the differentiation between a contractor and a developer. So a contractor is more like the house builder. Some of them are really challenged, but Philip will touch that. We do have, as Maggie's explains, what we don't have is right now is strategic direction. We don't have that housing strategy in place. What will sit below the housing strategy, which is also being worked up concurrent to the housing strategy, is what we're calling our affordable housing delivery plan. So that will be a subordinate document to the housing strategy. And the purpose of the affordable housing delivery plan and what that plan is there to do, is there to answer the question, how best should we deliver the 4,000 generally affordable homes, and what's the right way to deliver? To what extent should the council be delivering homes directly, i.e. building new council homes? What's the role of Broadway Living? And what's the role of the private sector and housing association? So that plan is designed to kind of help answer that question, and that's being developed at the moment. So a number of the major housing associations are challenged in their ability to deliver. So housing associations are facing multiple headwinds. So they've got to contend with all of the macroeconomic conditions that Savills explained. However, in addition to that, a number of them, particularly, actually the biggest ones are generally the ones that are most impacted, because they've got obviously the largest amount of stock that they have to invest in. So some of the challenges they've got is how do they respond to new big building regulations that require them to remove what is now viewed as harmless cladding. So there's still matters arising from that Grenfell tragedy that housing associations are having to contend with. The other challenge that housing associations have to contend with is climate change. They are rightly under pressure. You know, one of the biggest challenges in the whole country with climate change is domestic property that are leaking. They're not energy efficient. So housing associations are having to invest hundreds of millions of pounds in improving the energy efficiency of their housing stock. They've also got to invest in, which you would have seen in the news and be familiar with, just the overall quality to eliminate residents having to suffer from damper mold and all of the other health conditions that poor quality housing is correlated with. So the consequence of all of those challenges is a number of housing associations have either stopped their development pipeline completely or massively downscaled. So so just to kind of continue to build up the picture in terms of being quite challenging in terms of our ability to deliver 4,000 homes, we've got challenges in the contractor market, but we've also got housing associations who were previously delivering large proportions of affordable homes, now slowing down or pausing their pipeline completely because of all those challenges that I explained. And then we've got our own kind of capacity issues that we have to contend with in order to be able to deliver larger volumes of affordable housing on council-owned land. So what is the impact of all of these kind of headwinds that we're currently experiencing? So what is coming forward? This is some of this is particularly talking to the first 3 points, are particularly talking to what we're experiencing through the planning system. So a number of developers are coming forward and recommending developing housing with lower levels of affordable housing. So we look to strike an absolute minimum of 35%, but we've seen, recently a high-profile example being the Waitrose planning application proposed for West Ealing, currently at 20% affordable housing. Obviously a major scheme, a major organisation. That's currently the level that they're at, and we've seen others in that place. And however, the council has taken a very firm line on this. How we're thinking about things is, sites can only get developed once a century. So if we accept low levels of affordable housing now, that is not a situation that you can recover, in generations. So, we're taking a firm line. If it means maybe waiting a year or so and getting 35% rather than 20%, I think the view is that that will overall be better for the borough residents than accepting levels of affordable housing that are not meeting need. We've seen a number of proposed planning applications coming in recommending or proposing higher levels of building heights. So there are a number of reasons for this. Some of them are the viability reasons that we've just explained, but the other reason we haven't really touched on, again, it's related to Grenfell, is this so-called, you might have heard the language, double staircasing requirement. So the requirements for when a second staircase in a residential block is now required has changed in the last few months, and it's now, I think, 18 meters, whereas previously it was much higher. The problem that has had a massive impact on housing development in London. I think someone was saying to me recently that there's many as kind of 35,000 homes that are currently paused or having to go back through planning because of this issue. So that's how massive an issue it is. So what is happening in this borough is developers who had previously got planning applications for developments that exceeded that 18 meters, but only put a single staircase in, are having to come back into planning and revise their plans to take account of the new these new fire safety requirements. The problem is adding a second staircase is clearly adding cost, because you're having to either make the buildings fatter, or some developers are keeping the building envelope the same, but where they had more 3 beds, they might swap out the 3 beds for 1s and 2 beds in order to create the space to put that second staircase in, or they're going up. So there's pressure. We're seeing applicants coming forward with taller buildings than may have previously been the case. The other risk in this climate is partners, developers seek to value engineer. They seek to downgrade the quality of the buildings. They seek to minimize the investment in environmental sustainability. which, clearly both measures are not good for, for the long-term benefits of the borough. On our own schemes, we are seeing developers, housing associations looking to propose lower levels of capital receipts than had previously been proposed. So let me put those capital receipts in context, and you might say, okay, well, maybe quite often those capital receipts are repaying the council for money we've already invested. So, a good example is on an estate regeneration project, the council is always responsible for getting vacant possession. So, i.e., we have to compensate tenants to move them out. We have to buy back leaseholders to get the properties vacant in order to enable empty blocks to be demolished. So actually, those capital receipts, it's not just giving the council, it's not just necessarily about giving the council a return, it's also about repaying the council for money we've already invested. So that is creating some pressures. However, in every recession, there are opportunities. One of the really good opportunities for us is, because of that climate, there's an opportunity for the council to buy. And we think, we're very much, I want to be incredibly clear on one point, where we still absolutely committed and dedicated to the 4,000 target. So despite the stresses, absolutely still believe and intend to hit that target. And one of the ways in which we believe that we can achieve the target is by intervening in the market and taking advantage of distressed sites. So let me explain what I mean by that. A good example is a developer who started building private sale blocks 2 years ago when the private sale market was looking more buoyant. We've seen from the presentation in Savills, house prices are coming down. So they're getting to the end of the construction period and going, oh my God, I've got, 200 flats of private sale that I no longer feel confident I can sell at the price point assumed in the business plan. So they're saying, oh, council, would you be interested in buying this block of flats that we've previously intended for private sale? Maybe we can sell it to you and you can use it for affordable housing. And we're saying, well, if the price is right, then yeah, maybe we can do business. So we've got a handful of opportunities of that nature that we're currently interrogating at the moment. And where they represent good deals, value for money for the council, we will be looking to explore those and take them forward. And the cumulative effect, we think they can make some strong inroads towards our targets. Grant funding opportunities, there's recently been some additional grant funding available from the Greater London Authority, which we're talking about. But I think the final point is the true test of a partnership, say with a developer and a housing association, is not when the market is buoyant. The true test is when things are tough and difficult. And that's when you really have to lean on the partnership in order to be able to come together, work hard to keep the show on the road and deliver homes. So what are our ways to actually unlock housing? So we put this in two categories. Our ability to deliver the 4,000 homes is partly via third-party owned land and partly via land we own ourselves. So just to be clear, that 4,000 target has never been 4,000 on council-owned land. It's always been 4,000 generally affordable homes in the borough. That's always been the target. So the first thing we can do, which we are doing, is creating a positive planning framework that allocates sites for residential purposes. So our local plan is due to go to Cabinet and full council by the end of the year. which is the Regulation 19. That plan will identify over 50 sites for residential uses that developers and housing associations can come forward with. And actually, what I should have said when I mentioned the housing association earlier, but I'll mention now, is we're holding a event next month in Pitsanger Manor with housing associations. So because as I explained, there's only a very small number, a handful of housing associations who are actually developing in Ealing. We've taken the view we need to establish new relationships with housing associations. So we're having a kind of, we're open for business, working in partnership with housing associations events. We've managed to attract our keynote speaker is the Deputy Mayor for Housing at the GLA, Tom Copley. But we've also got some very senior people on the panel who are going to be attending, as well as a number of housing associations who are interested in working in Ealing. So, you know, I say that because that is one of the ways in which we're looking to form new partnerships. We've got our new website. If you're not aware, the Good for Ealing website is our inward investment website. So that website is now up and running. What that website is doing is it's got what we call an investor portal. And that investor portal is saying to developers, whether the commercial developers or residential developers, these are all the sites that are available in the borough. So it will capture the sites that I've just spoken about in the local plan, but it will also capture sites that are available for development in council-owned land. So firstly, it's about creating the planning framework and the policies. Secondly, is about having a really strong development management function. So the last time the government published their quarterly statistics on development management in London for dealing with major applications, Ealing was #1 in the whole of London. And that matters because, you know, I know multiple developers, and you know, they're careful about where they choose to invest. And they tend not to invest where they perceive the council's planning team to be under-resourced or overly difficult to work with, or where they consider the planning committee to be too unpredictable. Ealing is seen or viewed as a reliable partner. Landowner relationships, you know, so that's working with landowners in the borough who have got land that's suitable for residential development, and encouraging them to come forward with those strategic partnerships. So a good example of a strategic partnership is Transport for London or the NHS. They own land in the borough. You know, we're having strategic conversations with those partners about how we can work in partnership with them to unlock housing-led opportunities in our borough. Finally, as I've talked about buying land, and I talked about buying land on a voluntary basis. We do, of course, have compulsory purchase order powers, and members will be aware that there is talk amongst both the two main political parties about potentially changing those CPO powers that would make it even easier for local authorities to be able to buy land. So that is potentially one way. In terms of the levers that we've got to deliver housing on our own land, firstly, we can do a disposal, which is basically an unfettered sale. You know, we might even be by an auction. Highest price wins. The second way we can deliver homes is via direct delivery. So where the council is spending money to deliver new council homes. Thirdly, we can enter into partnerships with developers via a contract or a development agreement. Fourthly, we can have a joint venture where there's like a 50-50 risk share between the council and the private sector. And finally, we can do so-called lease and lease backs, where we kind of lease land to a partner, lease it back, but then we have to kind of give them some kind of financial guarantees. Finally, just to finish with a planning policy overview. So everything that is all planning policy in Ealing is governed by national and regional planning policy. Some of you may be aware, have seen recently that the government decided to change the housing targets from mandatory to advisory, but because of the London plan, we've still very much got a fixed target. So I won't dwell on those. The regional planning policy in London is of course set out in the London plan. As I mentioned earlier, we've got the London plan has given us that target of homes that we have to deliver. The GLA has taken the view that they overall are looking for 50% affordable homes, which even more strongly applies on public sector lands. But they're looking for an absolute minimum of 35%. And if you've got 35%, then they won't viability test you, which speeds everything up. If it's below 35%, then they will. We've followed the same kind of approach, really. So we're also seeking 50% affordable housing on for all applications, but an absolute minimum, as I mentioned earlier, of 35% affordable housing. In terms of what we're ideally seeking is 70% social, 30% intermediate. We favour on-site delivery. We're currently doing some work looking at what we're ideally looking for in terms of bedroom mix. And then finally, shared living scheme, or so-called co-living, we're prioritising that to Ealing Town Centre. And then, as I mentioned, what do we mean by generally affordable housing? So currently, it's social rent, London affordable rent, and London living rent are generally affordable in many wards in the borough. Shared ownership analysis is showing in many wards is not affordable. And you can see here the difference between those rents as compared to market rents. So that was hopefully a helpful overview. And then finally, Philip's going to take you through where we are of actually delivering homes.
Okay, let me share my screen. This is Philip Brown talking, and I will see that I can share my screen. Is that visible?
No, I don't think we can actually see it at all.
Okay. It's showing as being shared from my side. So if that's not visible from your side, I'm not sure what isn't working.
Philip, if you stop sharing, I can share it.
Okay.
I think this presentation is one we've all got that was in the papers that was sent out. This final one is.
I never got.
Oh, you didn't got it. So I was saying if everyone had it in front of them, we could maybe just talk to it. Yes, we can now, yeah.
No, there we go. So this is a presentation of the current housing delivery programme. The first slide is just an introductory slide, and the second is an introductory slide to the map, which is the third slide. This slide shows where the various developments are located. There are 4 different colours. The first colour, tranche 1, is the first set of schemes coming forward for Broadway Living RP, the local housing company. The second set of schemes, which is the yellow circle, is the tranche 2 schemes, which were originally intended for Broadway Living, but we'll come on to the fact that they've actually transferred to the housing revenue account. The red star schemes are the schemes that are in the new GLA funded programme, the 21-26 programme, and then the purple square, which is actually a diamond on the screen, is the regeneration schemes. And we have 2 types of regeneration scheme, which we'll come on to on the next slide. These schemes on the screen now are the housing revenue account development sites, and there are 2 types of delivery. In the first column, you can see regeneration schemes with partners, and there are 4 schemes listed there. Havelock Estate, the total number of homes is 922. This is in partnership with Peabody. However, at the moment, we are yet to agree a viable approach to the second phase for the Havelock Estate. The first phase was complete. The second phase, we are still negotiating with Peabody for a viable second phase. Greenman Lane is with A2 Dominion, a local housing association, and a developer called Real. As Peter referred to earlier, we've experienced some problems with contractors and insolvencies, and we understand that Real, one of the partners on Greenman Lane, is in financial difficulty and may soon go into administration. So we are working through what that means for Greenman Lane. Most of that estate is built. We're on the final couple of phases, and we may be able to develop those for ourselves rather than them being developed for the partnership. Dean Gardens is the Sherwood Close estate, and this is with Clarion, the largest housing association in the country. That's progressing well. It's on the final phase. And South Acton is our flagship development in Acton. This is the Acton Gardens estate. And this is a 15 to 20 year programme with Countryside. And
We're having some difficulties hearing you. You've cut out completely.
we're about halfway through now. The middle column, 3 here. We have
Sorry,
golf links.
Philip, you cut out for about 30 seconds. I don't know if you were just talking about the South Acton being the 15 to 20 year project. I don't know if you could just rewind slightly because we missed about half a minute what you were saying.
Sure. So the Acton Gardens project is our flagship. It's with L&Q and Countryside. It's about halfway through. We're about 1,900 homes built now. So that's another 10 years to run. The middle column, the Ealing-led regenerations. We have 3 estates that we are leading ourselves, which means that we are developing the estates, employing the contractor and retaining all the homes. Golf Links estate, we are now on site on phase 3. Phases 1 and 2 are complete, and phase 4 has an allocation from the GLA to deliver. The High Lane estate, we unfortunately have Real as our contractor. I mentioned just now that they are in financial difficulty, so we're working through what that means. We may need to reprocure. And the Copley estate, we have finished 5 phases of 7, and the 7th phase will be a major replanning of existing homes, but that has not yet started. So the Copley estate is mostly done. Copley phase 6 was just finished and won several awards, and I believe has been featured in some local press. The third column is our proposed regeneration of 2 older adults buildings, which are part of the older adults accommodation strategy and have come forward for consideration. The adults team is considering what kind of accommodation they would like to see re-provided on those two estates. Next slide. Broadway Living RP is the local housing company. I mentioned at the start the Tranche 1 schemes, which were the first schemes to come forward into the 1823 grant programme. This lists out the schemes. You can see that there are 7 on site. Unfortunately, however, 5 of those were with one contractor, Henry. And you may have seen in the press that Henry are now in administration. And so we are partway through a re-procurement exercise to bring another contractor on board to finish those 5 schemes. You'll see 2 are finished and handed over, and there are some homes in Broadway Living Limited to transfer. Broadway Living Limited is the top company, the company the council owns directly, and the Housing Association sits underneath Broadway Living Limited to maintain a distance so that it can demonstrate independence for the regulator. So once all those are finished, there'll be 342 homes in the Housing Association. Next slide. The Broadway Living Tranche 2 sites were part of a financial plan approved in April 2022. This is just before we started seeing the dislocation in the gilt market. The rates on gilts determines the cost of borrowing under Public Works Loan Board. BLRP is funded by Ealing. Ealing gets that money from the Public Works Loans Board and lends it on to BLRP. So during 2022, the cost of debt rose significantly. And what that meant was we needed to look at the Tranche 2 schemes again because they were no longer viable in the Housing Association. And many of those, and you'll see 4 have moved to the HRA: Lexton Road, Percival House, Northolt Grange in Sussex. 1 was deferred, Mandeville Road, into the 3rd tranche, which is the tranche coming forward now, and 3 were removed from the programme. Broomcroft and Canberra were removed for further consideration and replanning. Parkview Road is an existing youth centre, and the decision was taken to retain the youth centre, and so it was no longer a housing site. Subsequent to the decision to move schemes into the HRA, the Percival House scheme, I'm sure you will know, the decision was taken not to build a new build scheme on Percival House, but to refurbish the building. So we're now looking at redeveloping a smaller scheme on the car park at Percival House. Next slide, please. The Tranche 3 schemes are listed here for Broadway Living RP, and these are the schemes that are coming forward in the new GLA funding programme, which runs from 2021 to 2026. As Peter mentioned, these must start on site by March 2026. And that may seem like a long way away, but actually in development terms, to get a planning approval to tender and to secure a start on site, that is quite tight. Next slide. So this summarises our delivery of the GLA's 2018-23 Affordable Homes Programme, AHP. This is both the HRA delivery and Broadway Living RP. You'll see the top table indicates that we secured a total of 146 million of grant funding, which was the original 99 million bid, which was allocated in 2018, and then a further just under 48 million when the GLA extended the programme by 1 year to March 2023. And that was because of the pandemic and difficulties of delivering the programme during the pandemic. Our actual commitment, the second table, shows that we committed just under 102 million. The reason we didn't commit all is some schemes, principally Percival House and the Gurnell Leisure Centre, and also Parkview Road that I've mentioned in a previous slide, did not proceed, and we were not able to reallocate that funding to other projects. And so that grant funding was returned to the GLA. And Mandeville Road, I've mentioned previously, was in this programme, but was moved to the new programme. So that accounts for the difference. But overall, we were thanked by GLA for our performance and recognised as one of the top 2 boroughs in London in terms of programme scale, along with Greenwich in terms of new build. Next slide. These next few slides just summarise the schemes that have completed. So if we can just flick through these 2 slides quite quickly. And then we come to the allocations in the HRA for the new 21-26 programme. You'll see there are 3, Neville Close and Shilliker are the 2 schemes that I've mentioned that are the older adults schemes, which we are still looking at in terms of what kind of provision will be required on those 2 sites. And Golf Links Phase 4 is the next phase of Golf Links to commence now that Phase 3 has started. You can see that the total grant, which is the HRA grant on this slide and the grant for BLRP on the previous slide, comes to 110 million. So we've done better in our initial grant allocation this time round, 110 million, compared to the 99 million we secured in 2018 for the previous programme. So a good position altogether. And I think that is, no, sorry, there's a couple more slides. This summarises the BLRP allocation for 21-26. So you'll see this is 35, and that is the end of the presentation. Do apologise, that was a very quick run through, but I was conscious of time to give time for questioning.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you to all the presenters this evening. So I think we've got to the point for questions. So I know Councillor Summers, you were indicating. So do you want to start off?
Yeah, I've got a main question for Peter and others, but just for a point of clarification, one of those slides you mentioned, Philip, it said Northolt High School 92 homes. That's not going ahead, I understand, because they are now getting Department of Education funding. And can you just clarify that?
Yes, the Northolt School is now not part of our programme because they are getting DFE funding, and the DFE funding precludes any transfer out of land, that's education land, for other purposes. So the Northolt allocation for that school project won't be going ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, my main question is about, it's partly stemming from our site visit to the Green Quarter, or as I still like to call it, the gasworks site in Southall the other day, and something that was mentioned by Berkeley Homes. I mean, they may have been sort of playing me, as it were, but they did point out that there's no actual involvement by the council or BLRP in that site. The moment there's housing, so there's Catalyst, Clarion, and Optivo, I think the housing associations who are developing housing, and they pointed out that means that they can't guarantee that any Ealing residents have been housed in affordable housing there, which, you know, and obviously we have a target 4,000 affordable homes, and that means by anyone, and that's great. So these homes count towards that. But surely we want to get to a point where we've taken a significant amount of people off that, 11,000 or whatever housing waiting list from the borough. So I'm curious why the council or BLRP has not sort of bidded for those, or when would it bid for future ones? I mean, they talk about the whole thing lasting until 2050, the development of that huge site. So I just wondered in the longer term and medium to longer term whether it's something we consider, because obviously now we're not just developing our own sites, we're considering buying other people's sort of distressed private sites, which is a great idea. And just a question about the £100 million pot we've got from the GLA. Are there restrictions on that? Does that have to be? I mean, can we use that to buy the distressed private sites, or does that come from some other money? Could we use it to, develop a site on the Green Quarter? I'm just curious.
Happy to answer those questions. So I think firstly with Berkeley, it's great that you saw the sites. That's now the biggest development in the whole borough. I think, as they probably would have told you, they're looking to increase the number of homes on that site to somewhere in the region of 7,000 homes, all of course subject to planning. So in order to ensure that Ealing residents are housed, we don't need the council or the council's company to own the social homes. We do, however, need to ensure that we can secure via the planning system so-called nomination rights, which is Ealing Council nominating our residents into the social homes that Barclays will be delivering. So on every site not owned by the council where social housing is being built, the council will always expect and seek nomination rights so that we are able to allocate those homes in our borough to Ealing residents. Where it comes down to intermediate housing, so for example shared ownership, then there isn't an equivalent ability to have the same degree of certainty that those shared ownership homes end up going to Ealing residents. What we can do, what we look to do, is encourage housing associations in operating in the borough to prioritise their marketing on a more local scale first before they widen the net. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of the flexibility around the grant, so Philip's explained how the grant that we've got has been allocated, and it's allocated against specific schemes with very detailed specific outputs required. Where for whatever reason the council no longer believes that it's able to fulfill the grant obligations in relation to one or more of those schemes, we can seek to reallocate the money to another site, but only in negotiation with and with the agreement of the GLA. So we don't have it's not like it's our money and we've got discretion to move it around. If one of the schemes is failing to deliver, we would have to seek another agreement for the GLA that we could move it. And one of the things they would be looking for is kind of certainty of delivery, because they are judged by government on ensuring that the money spent actually results in starts on site by that 26 deadline.
Yeah, sure.
I could just come back on a couple of those things. I forgot to mention that Barclay also said that they were working with Brent Council in one of their sites in Alperton. So they basically sort of, the affordable housing there is being delivered by Brent Council itself. And I saw Brent on that list of very high up the councils who doing well to provide affordable housing. But yeah, so as far as for two things, one, the nomination rights, is that 100% of those blocks, or is it as sort of a lower percent of those developments which we have nomination rights to? And also anybody can come back to me on this, but regarding the housing strategy, are you sort of ruling out the council ever sort of bidding for affordable housing on that green quarter, or are you saying we'll look for it, depends what the deal is, it depends whether it's a good deal for us, sort of thing?
Okay, so I think the first thing to say, just to put a bit more context around this question about the council purchasing affordable homes from Barclays on that green quarter site. So this is how I think about this question, and therefore how I kind of would kind of guide and direct the teams that I lead. So the council, of course, has only limited finite borrowing capacity, whether it's via the general fund or whether it's via the housing revenue account. And one of the things I've already spoken about is our housing revenue account, the same as housing association's business plan, has to deal with that same kind of investment in terms of kind of retrofit and damper mold, etc. So we have to be selective of where we spend our capital borrowing, and I will prioritize capital borrowing on delivering additionality. So on the Barclays scheme, that affordable housing is already going to be delivered. So if the council were to borrow 50 million quid to buy affordable homes on Barclays that would otherwise be purchased by a housing association, there aren't going to be any more affordable homes in the borough. There's no additionality. They're going to be delivered anyways. So what we look to do is focus our spend on where we can add additional affordable homes. So if Barclays were to come to us, and I've already offered them, so I have a quarterly strategic meeting with Barclays. I've already said to them, if you've got any concerns with your ability to sell blocks that were currently contemplated for private housing, come and talk to us and we'll have a discussion about whether we can buy them and flip them into affordable housing. Because that will deliver some additionality for us. That will get us closer to our 4,000 target. So we'll prioritize our money where it creates additionality. And there may be opportunities with Barclays to do that, but not with the affordable housing proposed with their private housing. Nomination rights, we will always seek and expect 100% nomination rights in perpetuity. However, it will go down to individual discussions, but that will be always what we would expect. Then remind me of the question on the housing strategy.
And no, I think you pretty much answered it, because
Fine.
Thank you. And thanks very much, everyone, for the presentations. I'm sort of going to go back a bit onto the first presentation, the Savills one. Thanks for that. Sort of obviously gives sort of a broad overview of the London perspective and a bit on Ealing. So I'd be keen to understand a bit more. The forecast, I think, was 12.5% drop in prices. I presume that's a general figure for the whole of London. Do you have any insights specifically for Ealing? And also I can't remember now which slide it was. I think it said from a development perspective, prices are falling. And there was a sort of the help to buy, I think, was put there as well, and that it ended last October. Just interested to know what sort of impact that would have on the sales of houses in Ealing, and what the picture sort of looks like moving forward on that. And also, obviously, the major slide that I think stood out was the one on the housing delivery, and Ealing is clearly quite low on that list, given our neighbouring authorities. So I think it was Brand, Hammersmith and Harrow have all exceeded. What are they doing right that we are not doing in Ealing? I think, this is really important to address moving forward. And sort of a more broader point as well, and I know we've touched upon this sort of in different discussions, but given one of our key contractors, Henry, has gone into administration, what does this mean for a borough like ours in Ealing in meeting housing delivery targets, compounded by the fact, as you've said, that planning applications for new developments are down, and sort of construction costs are going through the roof. So excuse the pun, but that is the case. So be keen to hear your thoughts on those, please. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll probably pick up the first couple. I can provide sort of a view and a comment in terms of sort of local authority house building performance as we see it as a team here at Savills. But I dare say Peter, Philip and others will have views as well. And likewise, I'll probably pass over to them to talk specifically about some of the responses that they're carrying out with regards to challenges in the contractor market, which is absolutely not a unique situation which the council is facing at the moment. First of all, if we just go back to a couple of the specific questions regarding our slides, just as a point of clarification more than anything else, well spotted in terms of the forecast for 12.5% reduction in sales values or house prices in the slide. That was actually our November 22 forecast for the subsequent 12 months up to October, i.e. the current month. The actual outturn performance, while still demonstrating a fall in house prices, has been a more muted reduction than the 12.5% that we originally forecast. That has really been built off the back of further economic resilience, particularly with regards to wage inflation and relatively low unemployment, than some of the economic assumptions that had fed into our forecast last November, which I think it's fair to say should also be framed in the context of the immediate fallout of the September 22 mini budget and significant economic adjustments that were made to policy rates and other factors in the economy at that time. So just as a heads up, our revised forecast will be published actually next month, and I'm sure will be of interest to the group. In terms of alternatives to Help to Buy, the impact of Help to Buy and the closure of the Help to Buy programme has, as some of the data that we presented, had a material impact in terms of sales rates, undoubtedly. Now, there were various voices in the industry which were raising concerns about the impact that Help to Buy had in terms of arguably artificially maintaining values at a level that actually the market would otherwise be unable to sustain. So part of the impact of the termination of the Help to Buy programme, alongside all of the other wider economic and market forces and challenges that have been experienced, has been, yes, a fall in sales values, but as important, you might say, a tail off in terms of sales rates, or as we might term absorption rates, that house builders and developers are experiencing. Now, there's various avenues that the market can explore, that participants can explore. An obvious one is chip or reduce asking prices to incentivize sales, and we have seen some evidence of that from the regional house builders and developers operating across London. But equally, we've seen a favouring of offering perhaps enhanced incentives packages. So SDLT relief being an obvious example for incoming purchasers, improved furniture packs, etc., to encourage buyers to transact. It's been mentioned by a couple of others as well, and as we picked up in our slides, the market is looking at alternative exit routes, including bulk disposals to housing providers and other third parties and investors in the market as well. And we also talked about the overseas market. So there's various avenues and routes that are being explored to alleviate some of the impact of the termination of the Help to Buy programme. But that, compounded with other challenges, headwinds that the market has experienced, has led to, as we presented, a reduction both in property values, but also a reduction in transactions occurring across London in the last 9 to 12 months. I don't know if I'm happy to offer an opinion in terms of a relative performance between Ealing and neighbouring boroughs, but I don't know, Peter, perhaps you might have a view on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. So I think Philip mentioned earlier that in the last GLA programme, when it comes to delivering affordable homes, Ealing was top 2 in London. So I think it's important to separate out overall housing numbers with performance on affordable housing. So whereas overall housing numbers, Ealing wasn't towards the top. Particular levels of affordable housing, Ealing is performing very strongly across London, and I think that's reflecting the administration's priorities. I would, however, say that levels of housing in the borough, I'm expecting to be rising now. We've got the Crossrail catalyst, so that's obviously not been there for particularly long, and developers have really started responding positively now that Crossrail is there. So I think that will really help to unlock higher levels of housing, and therefore help with the levels of affordable housing more generally. I think the other question was this point about contractors going under, and what are the implications for us, how we kind of working that through. So with Henry, it's only happened relatively recently, and I think, as Philip mentioned, we're still in the process of analysing and therefore crystallizing the exact financial implications to the council of those sites going into administration, in terms of what it's going to cost the council to restart those sites. What we are looking at, what I've said to the team is, firstly, across our portfolio, we need to rerun due diligence checks. So at the point at which you appoint the contractor, one of the things you would look at is their financial health and resilience. I've asked the team to revisit that for the schemes that we've got, to try and anticipate whether there is any of the contractors' kind of financial health has deteriorated since we first appointed them, to enable us to better kind of anticipate any future administration matters. So that's one of the things we're doing. For future sites, and Philip's spoken about the pipeline, there are different options that we can pursue. Firstly, the contractor administration particularly hurts us where the council has pursued direct delivery, because therefore we've appointed the contractor. Where the council works in partnership, so for example, let's take Acton Gardens. So where a contractor to go under on that particular scheme, or on the Green Quarter in Southall, it would be either Barclays or Countryside's responsibility for having to deal with any financial implications and having to reappoint. So one of the things that we'll be thinking about for future sites is this the right moment? Is this the right market for us to be appointing contractors, given that we know right now they're more unstable than they have been for a long time? So we're going to think about it in the context of our development strategies. But the other thing that we'll be thinking about is diversification of risk. We've got 4 sites that have gone under with Henry. So we put 4 sites into the same contractor basket, which would have generated some kind of financial efficiencies at the time. But the downside risk has materialized. The downside risk is, if you give all the sites to a single contractor, then you're vulnerable if that contractor then goes under. So we can think about where we are going to do direct delivery. potentially spreading them across multiple contractors, and obviously increasing our requirements around kind of financial health. So there's some of the things we can do to kind of respond to this kind of volatile contractor market, if that answers your question.
How far are, what percentage are we off the target? And the other question was, you say we turned down West Ealing because it was only 20% social housing. We're turning these people down. You're hoping they're going to come back. I understand that, but won't that slow up us achieving our targets if we do go around buying up private things?
Okay. So firstly, in terms of where we are against the target, the honest truth is we're still working through exactly where we think we're landing in relation to the 4,000 homes. We're still in the process of evaluating that. I would be happy, Chair, to provide a written update in the next couple of weeks or so once we've got that number, because we're doing that. In terms of, so we've not turned down the Westfield application yet, because it's not kind of got to planning committee. So the Waitrose, what we are saying is at 20% affordable housing, you know, that falls well below our minimum expectations of 35%. So if it stays at that level, we're expecting that we'll be minded to recommend refusal. In terms of whether that will slow down delivery, I mean, ultimately it would, but I think the alternative view is, as I said, sites are typically only going to get developed once a century. So if you think about it in the context of sites only getting developed once a century, then if the site returns in a year or two when the housing market's in a stronger position, and it comes back at 35% or higher, then you could take the view that it's worth waiting a year or so rather than accepting a very low level. There's one other important point to make in relation to this, which is precedent. If you were to approve 20% affordable housing on a very large, high-profile scheme, it sends exactly the wrong signal out to the rest of the industry that Ealing's a place where you can come in and lowball on affordable housing. And that's not the message we want to be sending out to developers or housing associations.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Dinser.
You know, you was talking about financial checks. We would have done a financial check on Henry's that wasn't much good. So what are we going to do differently that any future financial checks are sound? And secondly, I think this is the point Chris made as well, that we are looking to buy the developers which who can't develop. We are looking to buy those. But the way I see it is we are bailing these companies out. How are we going to make sure the taxpayer get value for money? And who will decide what is the right market value for these properties which we are looking to buy back?
Well, thank you. Good questions. So I think on the first question, so when the council appointed Henry, it would have carried out quite extensive financial due diligence checks prior to appointment. So in terms of kind of what we can do differently, I think there's a couple of things. I think firstly, which I've already alluded to, is, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen here, but it's certainly something that, you know, I can assure that it does happen going forward, but I know a lot of councils aren't so good at this, is rerunning those checks. So what a number of councils do is they will run the checks at the point of appointment, and then they don't do that ongoing contractual management piece of actually having having a serious senior level meetings in order to have up-to-date understanding of the performance of those. So there's something around having that ongoing strategic relationship and revisiting the checks. But I've asked for lessons learned to be carried out. So I've instructed the team to do a complete lessons learned on the circumstances around which we appointed Henry. Did we do everything that the council would have expected officers to do in terms of due diligence checks in order to assure ourselves that this situation wouldn't arise? And did we do everything we could to protect the council in the scenario where the risk materialized? So that piece of work I have instructed and will be reporting back to me soon. On the question about are we bailing developers out, it's a good question, but the way how I would answer this and the way we are thinking about this is, let's say a developer had assumed that a block of flats would be able to sell for 100 million quid. Let's say the total value of all the properties on an individual sale basis would accumulate to 100 million quid. Clearly, we are not going to be paying 100 million quid. So we're not bailing them out in terms of paying the sum of money that they would have assumed in their business plan when they first thought about this scheme. The fact that they are coming to us is because they no longer have the confidence that they can sell the homes to reach that value. So we would only be doing business with a partner in that situation where they're distressed, where we were able to realize what's referred to as a bulk buying discount. So we would expect them to significantly discount the value of those homes to reflect a price that would be affordable to the council for affordable housing. So, a developer would typically sell a private homes over a period of time. You can only sell, 2 or 4 homes a week, for example. The council obviously will be able to buy everything on day one. So they would actually get some real cash flow benefits from us if we were to buy the block off them. But how we think about the value for money for a council is, for example, if it's a social rent home, we would work it out in terms of what is the net rental income we're going to get from that home over a 30-year period, plus any grant funding that we can apply. So that's what the home's worth to us. We can't afford to pay sums of money over that because the home isn't worth that much to us. So we will only be paying sums of money that represents value for money based upon the affordable tenure.
Thank you. Stephanie's got a question online.
Thank you, Councillor. My question stems from the housing strategy. So we're going back a bit, I think, to our first presentation with Maggie Caffalo, where Maggie talked about consulting widely and with various groups about the housing strategy. But one thing I noted during the presentation, that there was no reference to the Ealing Council Race Equality Commission housing demands. And that doesn't seem to have fed into the strategy at all. Now, there were 4 key aspects that I think is quite important that Ealing take account of and feed that into their housing strategy.
Can I just add, the presentation that I did doesn't include everything. We've actually spoken to people in relation to that, so it will be incorporated. So I think that presentation doesn't actually include every single person that we've actually spoken to, but that's definitely an important element and will be taken into account.
Okay, so it may not have included everybody that you've spoken to, but in terms of the demands and what was required of the housing strategy, it's not made it into your strategy either. And
No,
so
no,
I guess is the point that I'm making. It needs
no,
to
what I
feature
want,
into the
what I wanted
strategy.
to say that it will be that what the presentation we did, which we didn't know that we were actually going to be coming here, because we did it quite quickly. So it doesn't actually include everything that we've done, but we've definitely taken it into account. And we've talked to people who've been working in it and will be incorporated into that. One of the things that was very clear that was made to us by Peter and others is that they wanted the housing strategy to actually represent and actually have impact from other work that's being done. So it's a very important element that we're aware of. So we will be taking that into account.
And the final thing I wanted to say, just in terms of the Ealing's Race Equality Commission, is that we have actually, the Citizens Tribunal members have actually been waiting for the housing strategy since November of last year when they were promised it. And up until now, we've had very little engagement with Ealing in terms of the housing. And I think it would be really quite good if somebody could take that on board and really increase the engagement and participation with the Citizen Tribunals members so we can show that we're taking these accounts quite seriously.
Absolutely. I think that you're quite right. We've got a number of groups that have been suggested that we talk to. I think actually that was one of them. We haven't got around to that yet, but it actually will be part of the consultation that we will do, and we'll make sure that we do that.
And just to add on that, I am very aware that there are actions arising from that Race Equality Commission action plan that sit with me, and I've just got my calendar open. I've got a meeting next week with members of my team to talk to them about the progress they're making against the action plan that relates to the directorate that I lead. So it is something that we're very much taking seriously and are doing our best to progress.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions before we start thinking about recommendations, unless anyone had any, you can come in after me. It was, so just three things really. One was on sort of risk and the risk register in relation to this. I think you've touched on risk quite a few times. Where does the risk register sit? How often is it scrutinised? Who's scrutinising that? I guess in particular, obviously the £100 million of GLA funding, I may have heard it wrong at the start, but did you say that all of that money depends on all of those properties having the spades in the ground? Because that sounds like there's obviously quite a lot of risk associated with that. So how is that being mitigated and how is that being monitored? Because clearly, obviously, part of the issue is that you mentioned, and potentially understandably, that the target of where we are now isn't really clear. I guess since obviously you're doing that sort of spot check now, how, as you move across between now and 2026, how often are you going to be checking where are we in relation to that target? Because it was, the presentation obviously had lots of different schemes, etc. But I found it really hard to follow about what's built, what's been given planning permission, where are we on all of those things. So I think sort of clarity and how often that's updated, I think is important. Playing a bit of devil's advocate here, really, but it was just on the talking about obviously delaying some of these potential developments when it comes to the level of affordable housing. I know you touched on some other sort of mitigations that how the developers are coming with, for example, reduction in quality or the height of housing. I guess obviously the demand for these houses are now, obviously delaying that. There are a number of reasons for that, but that's not going to solve the issues now. It just sort of means people are waiting longer on housing lists or inadequate accommodation at the moment. So how do we realistically balance that, despite all the other factors? And the final thing was just on sort of this quality issue. I think one of the interesting things when we went to the Southall Gasworks site was that the chap from the developers was saying that in some of the housing association blocks, they've had some real issues with, for example, antisocial behaviour. The housing association is not really taking responsibility. They've had to employ security. So obviously you've got this meeting with potentially new housing associations in the next few weeks. How do you ensure that we get responsible housing associations who are not just, it's not just about investing and providing those properties, but how they then upkeep them and make sure that, you know, all the other things that are associated with a property are sort of being done as well.
Thank you, Chair, for that. So I'll start with the risk question by talking about governance. So in terms of kind of internal governance, I chair a monthly housing delivery board. So that brings together not only all of the officers in the team responsible for the delivery of the homes, but it also brings together other corporate colleagues in finance, legal, and property, etc. So that is the space where we evaluate performance against the schemes, and we evaluate the risk related to those schemes. I think in relation to the GLA grants, so yes, it does, as I said, we said, does relate to well, it relates to starts on site, not to completions by 26. As you said, you know, there's a lot of money there, so that creates risk. So firstly, let me just so everyone's clear what the risk is. The risk is clawback. So in the event that we're unable to deliver the homes tied to the money, we have to return the grant to the GLA. We don't lose kind of council money, but we would have to return the grant. So that's the risk. How we're looking to mitigate the risk is by thinking now about identifying development opportunities that don't currently have grant tied to them. So in the event that sites with grant attached are no longer able to fulfill their grant conditions, we're not at a standing start. We've already started to develop a pipeline of schemes that we can then negotiate with the GLA to act as a substitute for the sites that are underperforming. So that's how we're looking to mitigate it. In terms of kind of how often we're looking at the targets against the 4,000. So it's a big exercise that Adam's leading now, just to kind of combine all the data sets. So we obviously understand what we're delivering on our own land, but combining the data sets with everything coming for the pipeline into a digital format on a system called Power BI will enable us to monitor it at that delivery board on a monthly basis. So that when we're able to kind of share it, what you'll be able to see is we will RAG rate the entirety of our pipeline. So we have we use a color for schemes that are completed, green for schemes that are, you know, are highly likely to be able to get underway by 26, and then obviously kind of like more like the orange and the reds for schemes that are, to varying degrees, less likely. So, you know, members will be able to see the totality of the program RAG rated against its probability of starting within that 2026 program. But what you'll be able to see is, once the work's ready, is it's not 4,000. You know, we're looking at a bigger pipeline of 6,000 or so, which would enable the substitutions if the sites that we've got the money tied to are not able to come forward. You know, that isn't me saying, you know, don't worry, we're definitely going to deliver the 4,000. You know, it's clearly a very challenging climate, as it's been extensively explained. However, I am clearly saying that we're incredibly committed to hitting that target. in terms of kind of delaying housing, like as I said, the councils thinks that it will be, in terms of kind of the relationship between delay and kind of housing supply, affordable housing supply. I think the view is, if we were to accept low levels of affordable housing, overall that would reduce the supply of affordable housing, because it will send the signal out to the other players in the market that Ealing's a soft touch when it comes to levels of affordable housing. So come in and chuck in 20% application and you'll get it approved. So we think ultimately, if you look at it in a 3 or 4 year period, that where sites come forward over a slower period of time but achieve 35% affordable housing, rather than get determined more rapidly at 20%, that is the better approach to dealing with housing need. That will drive up levels of affordable housing. And as I said earlier, we've got one of the best records in London on levels of affordable housing. And one of the reasons for that is because the council has taken a tough line on not accepting abysmally low levels of affordable housing. On your final point, it is a good point. I think one is a definition of a good housing association. I think it isn't just the housing associations that's got an appetite to build, that's got a track record. The council will also expect to work with housing associations that have got a strong social ethos and are thinking not just about housing and the quality of housing, but addressing worklessness and working with residents to get them into employment. Housing associations that care about quality and climate change, but also housing associations that are responsible and are strong on antisocial behaviour. So, in that upcoming forum, they are the type of partnerships that we'll be looking to make, and we'll be prioritising. We'll be thinking broadly about how we define a good and responsible RP.
Thank you. Before we think about recommendations, was there anything else anyone else wanted to add? No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just one question. It's something we haven't really touched on, but I think it was mentioned right at the beginning of one of the slides or presentations about that we have the failing to deliver affordable, housing in general. So I'm talking about housing in general. And am I right in thinking that one of those reasons is a sort of shortage of construction workers and labour costs, and that there's basically there's a need for more apprentices, more construction. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole Brexit situation, but that has had an impact and is making it difficult for private contractors and ourselves to just build these things.
That is correct. So what's occurred in the last few years has been really challenging for the kind of construction workforce, because Brexit has been an issue, but also what has been a real issue has been the pandemic, because what happened during the pandemic is a lot of construction workers returned back to their countries of origin and haven't come back to the UK since. So that is a real problem. And that is one of the components for this high level of inflation that we've had, because of everyone appreciates, because of the supply and demand dynamics, because the construction workforce has shrunk, the price for construction workers has inevitably gone up, which is one of the reasons why the price of homes, of building homes, has gone up, because of those pressures on construction workers. So, but you touched on one of the solutions. So, Ealing has a construction sector forum, and one of the things we were talking about only last week is, what more can Ealing do to join up those residents in the borough who are currently unemployed with all of the construction jobs that are being created through our significant development pipeline. So good work is underway with apprenticeships that can be captured via Section 106, etc. But we are examining how we can intervene to kind of ramp up upskilling residents in the borough so that they can take advantage of all the construction jobs, which will ultimately not only create better quality jobs for people in the borough, but it will help stabilize construction prices. So it's a win-win.
Thank you. So if we turn to recommendations, I don't know if anyone wanted to sort of kick off with any suggestions on what we might want to sort of make as our recommendations from this panel.
I've got a few.
Yeah, start off.
Yeah, just floating ideas out there. One is sort of learning the lessons from Henry, whether you should have a recommendation that, in it, no contractor should be given sort of more than 2 sites in any tranche of work, of funded work. Secondly, it's not much of a recommendation, but it's basically just I totally agree with the policy of playing hardball and sticking to the 35% affordable housing, and that we should sort of maintain that line whenever possible, giving a bit of flexibility. But and thirdly is on sort of resident satisfaction or tenant satisfaction. And I've got one site I'm thinking of in my ward. It was built by a contractor. It was their first and last job for the council. There was numerous teething problems with it, and I think I'm still getting emails from residents. It was built 3 or 4 years ago. But is there a way of sort of having a satisfaction survey, sort of 1 to 3 years after people move in, to find out whether they are, happy with the building, whether it is, whether it's doing the job that it was designed for?
I disagree with what.
Okay.
But just to say, you couldn't give that sort of restriction to a great big group like Countryside, because they've got their own developers. So I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive if that stopped us doing things. I don't know, the officer might have a view, but I wouldn't want to stop us, because you can't compare. No, you talking about contractors.
Oh, okay.
Because they're not all the same. You're not comparing like with like. So I wouldn't want to stop us, that's all.
But could it be more, because I had written down sort of thinking about the financial checks I think Councillor Dinsmore talked about, in terms of actually defining what those financial checks are, and how, as you say, Peter, throughout the process, how you continue to check their financial sort of viability. Is there somewhere that could be defined? Could a set of criteria be drawn up that, I don't know, that's brought to cabinets, etc., that sort of underpins then how those contracts are given out? So that sort of comes to your point, but it's more subtle than sort of just saying two sites per developer. I don't know, Peter, do you think is that a realistic way of doing it?
I think in terms of a recommendation, I mentioned carrying out this lessons learned, and it may be that the lesson learned will help inform the recommendations around potentially strengthening our approach to financial checks. I'm certainly comfortable with the recommendation that around the kind of the continuous or the regular financial checks, and it's not just financial checks, it's making sure that we're consistently having those kind of strategic relationships with contractors, which I haven't been in that long, so I'm not saying necessarily haven't, but it's certainly good practice. So if we have, continue. If we haven't, then we certainly must. I think restricting sites, I mean, I wouldn't want us to restrict sites, but I think I think having an emphasis on officers to demonstrate where it is giving multiple sites to a single contractor, that they've properly contemplated and evaluated the additional risk that would occur. I think that is reasonable.
And then so it's something around, we'll word the actual recommendation and circulate it so we can all agree by email. But I guess something else just on, you know what you've just said, but articulating what that is, what those expectations are on a contractor as well. The second thing, I guess the 35% affordable housing, I don't think that's probably I wouldn't have thought that's contentious. No. Resident satisfaction, I think that's important. I'd also written about having, I think Peter, you mentioned sort of the social ethos of housing associations. So sort of having a definition of what a housing association partner should be and what what they should be aspiring to. So as you say, like that they want to help with other aspects of it. So tackling antisocial behavior, ensuring that it helps get people into work. So if that could be articulated before, ideally before you go out and find those new partners, I think that would be helpful. So maybe tie in both of that, because I think the resident satisfaction surveys will tie into, that will tell us as well which partners are good partners to carry on having sort of a relationship with.
Yeah, because you're probably thinking of the same point. When we were at the Southall site, they were talking about antisocial behaviour that's already arisen on that site, and obviously there's a lot of residents who probably live in those buildings who are suffering as a result.
I was going to say, in terms of financial checks, I think there should be a set criteria that whichever the contractor is, they should be able to demonstrate that the value of the contract, they have at least 25% or 30% in reserve. So if there is any kind of stress, there's money there which they can draw upon, rather than us carrying out a visual check. Their finances are fine and that's it. And later on we find out that it's not. I don't know, things don't happen the way I say it, but that's my suggestion.
I think you make a point. It's some sort of stress test to sort of demonstrate that they, yeah. Okay.
They have some kind of money reserve.
Yeah. How's this, Moss?
I was at a conference, the Lib Dem one, and I actually bumped into a Clarion guy, and I had an issue with a resident. Anyway, he goes, "It's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's when we buy into places and we haven't built them, and we don't know how well they've built them." And I thought, okay, and that was his excuse for not dealing with the problems. So it was, but anyway, it's conference, so let him off. But what I want to know is who checks to see if the ones that we have, that the council's in partnership with, are they evaluated that they actually built well, so that in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, you haven't got problems that the council has to pay for.
So I think that definitely will tie it in. So something around, surveying residents, checking how the properties are built, etc. So I think we can definitely create some wording around a recommendation on that. So I think those are sort of the three key, recommendations. So one on lessons learned and the sort of financial viability, affordability, and then sort of the quality of both sort of properties and housing associations, and how we get residents involved in that conversation, and how then that informs the council in terms of who they make or who they have partnerships with going forward. Is there any other suggestions or thoughts? Oh, yes. Yeah.
Just with regards to going back to contractors and checking on their financial viability regularly, we could perhaps put the onus on the contractor to report, maybe send an updated business plan to us every couple of years, or to report certain factors to us, rather than us having to go after them. If it's the onus is on them to report to us, then it just takes a lot of pressure off us.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. I think that draws an end. I think that's everyone sort of said something they want. I don't know if it's, sorry, did anyone online want to say anything? No. Okay, thank you. Just to say, I just wanted to sort of note if we can thank Barclays Homes for taking us around on the site visit. I think that was really helpful. I know, Harjit, you kindly emailed, what's his name now? Was it Darren who took us around? Richard who took us around to say thank you on behalf of the panel. So thanks everyone who came along. That was a really interesting morning. Just finally on the work programme, we've got the next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, the 5th of December. We'll be looking at sustainability and climate action and looking at how the council's working to the council target of being net zero by 2030. And then the final meeting is looking at Ealing's economic growth. So any suggestions or any thoughts, you can say now, or you can just email in if you had anything particular that you want sort of to cover in any of those topics and let us know. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and see you on the 5th of December.
Thank you.